I'm Michael Keppel, Managing Director with Lakeland Advisory Group. This is one of our many podcasts. We've been talking about business valuations and litigation support. Today, I have the pleasure of reintroducing Jan. Jan is the Vice Chairman of the New York State Society of CPAs for Business Valuation and Litigation Support. I had the privilege of knowing Jan and working with Jan for several years now. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Jan.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to make an appearance and talk to you on the topic of business valuation in the bankruptcy space. And I look forward to continuing the discussion from where we picked up last time.
Excellent. Thank you. I guess we can just pick up where we left off last time is some of the unique nuances associated with business valuations in the distressed and or bankruptcy world. And I think the first one that people have to be cognizant of the fact is the going concern. That is the fundamental linchpin, if you will, of accounting and finance. When you take that away, when a company's in bankruptcy, that drastically changes everything. And let's talk about the ramifications of eliminating or having to associate a very high risk with the fundamental basis of a going concern.
Absolutely. As with all assertions of asset and business values, the standard of value, the assumption of going concern, and the approach to business valuation must fit the fact and circumstances. For example, in a situation where business will be liquidated, obviously does not justify a going concern presumption. And the analysis will need to consider not just the financial condition of the entity, but also the industry, the corporate structure, the operating characteristics, and specific circumstances that are unique to this specific business. All will need to be taken into consideration.
No, that's a very important point, Jan, is even when someone is doing the projections, if you're having a going concern in Chapter 11, you're trying to work your way out, you have to be very realistic about the assumptions and the characteristics of it. And one thing that we see in the projections is that the individual or firm doing the projection does not account for all this, especially with regards to the ramifications. If a company goes into bankruptcy, in addition to the going concern down the road, they have to also recognize that they're going to have some employee issues, some vendor issues, and some customer issues. Once someone goes into bankruptcy, it's like sending out an SOS, and there's going to be ramifications of that.
Yes, unfortunately, it's not going to be the ABBA song that we are talking about.
Yes,
but let's take a look at the solvency analysis, for example. Which is an important component of the overall bankruptcy proceedings. The bankruptcy court recognizes three tests of solvency: the balance sheet test, the capital adequacy test, and the cash flow test. And all of these three tests are interrelated and address the question of value. However, when we are focused on the going concern aspect, for a business that is considered as a going concern, the three most common methods that are used to determine the value of the assets under the balance sheet test involve the income approach, the guideline public company analysis, and the guideline private company analysis transaction. Under the going concern principle, once the asset value is determined, then we need to compare the amount of the liabilities on the books plus any amounts necessary to reflect the amount of liabilities that are contingent or off the balance sheet. Now, why is going concern an important aspect here? Well, if the company, for example, owes some amounts of payables, for example, and it's filing for liquidation, then those payables that are contingent on the premise that the company is a going concern are no longer relevant or adequate for the solvency analysis. And that would be a perfect example of why going concern is an important predicate for the valuation for companies that are in the bankruptcy proceedings.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the income approach. It's very difficult to do the projections on the income approach without really fine tuning and have significant experience. The other
Right.
thing is that valuators have to be cognizant of when they go out there and do market guidelines. Well, these other markets were not or are not in Chapter 11. There's so much you have to take into account. You comparing apples and oranges. You really have to be cognizant of the fact your ability to find an entity in that industry, that size, etc., with that product mix. Also in bankruptcy, it's you're going to have an extremely small sample size if the sample size not equal to zero. So all these things really add to the complexity of doing the valuation in the bankruptcy.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up the income approach. Our favorite go-to, almost default, I should probably say it, but most often relied method to value a company is under the income approach, given that we have a history of per company performance. And when we look at either the capitalization of earnings or the DCF, to build up the requisite discount rate or the cost of capital rate, one of the important aspects that one of the important components of that approach is to define under the build-up method what is the specific company risk or what is the specific industry risk, right? So again, if the company is in liquidation, how high is the company's specific risk? I would say it's pretty damn high. Therefore, the discount rate will be significantly higher as well. And it's interesting when we look at the interplay between the industry and the company. If the industry is healthy, but the company is declared bankruptcy, it's one set and pattern. However, if the company is in an industry that's overall declining, well, that impacts not just the company-specific risk and not just the industry-specific risk, but also quite possibly, if we were to rely on the market approach, the adjustment of specific market multiples, since the entire industry is undergoing significant crisis.
No, that's absolutely right. You can't just look at the company in a vacuum. If the industry is doing very poorly as a whole, or not even doing well, it's just surviving, that adds significantly to all these risk factors, both the known and the unknown. And it's the risk factors and putting together these risk factors and analysis that requires the experience and subjectivity. That's why, in my personal opinion, we're so far away from using AI to do valuations, because these criteria, Jan, that we've been talking about are based upon experience and are subjective based upon that. Every company, especially in the Chapter 11 and with all the circumstances surrounding Chapter 11, is totally different. And you have to have someone with the cognitive experience to go through and do this.
Sure. Since you brought up AI, and that's a hot button topic just about everywhere, how do you feel, how do you envision AI playing role, not just in the valuation space, but in the bankruptcy specific case, right? I know we do need to do a certain amount of legal research and finding citations. How do you foresee, or how do you see profession being changed by the use and implementation of AI?
Oh, I think AI is a fantastic tool. We use AI, for example, you do the market analysis, you can have competitive, all these ratios, everything done in AI. Obviously, you always got to check it, and we got some tricks that we use to check the work. But when you get to the subjective natures that we just spoke about the discount rates and a few other things, that's fine. You got to use professional judgment. Now, AI can provide, for example, what the economic rate is, what the 30-year treasury or 10-year treasury bond is as the date of the valuation report. AI can do a lot of that, but there's a lot that AI can't do. Last year, and I know we're late in 2025, but at the end of 2024, and AI has changed significantly since then, we took 6 business valuations that were performed by our firm and ran them through AI to see what the results would be. And the results were significantly different, not close, not within 15, 20%, significantly, at least a change of 30%. And the reason being the subjective nature. When we do a business valuation, the things that we take a look at that make a difference are the soft things. We got to interview the management team. I'm a strong believer in the management team. You have a good management team if they're making widgets or making software. The same team can do it, the same people, the same drivers. That's what really counts. And the product, in walking through the factory, kicking the tires, those are the things that AI can't do, but are significant differentiators in the business valuation. It separates the men from the boys.
Absolutely, absolutely. It does not. Sometimes an on-site visit is really an eye-opener on the state of the business. Some information just cannot be gleaned from looking at the financials or even speaking with the management. Now, it's not always possible to do an on-site visit, but at least a walkthrough, a video walkthrough, a photo does a lot to really nicely assess the state and take that into consideration when building out your discount rates, when performing your adjustments, and when ultimately authoring a report.
No, I agree fully. And other than during the pandemic time,
Sure.
it's a prerequisite that someone from our team physically goes out there and takes a look at it. I want to
Sure.
meet with the management team over a cup of coffee. I want to talk to them and hear about what their plans are and how they're going to get out in the specific bankruptcy. I mean, what's the plan? And also, realistically, people who go through the bankruptcy, they have to have not only an exit plan, assuming that they get out of the Chapter 11, and most companies, by the way, do not. Especially the smaller the company going into bankruptcy, the less the chance of them getting out of a Chapter 11. I mean, it's phenomenal, those that don't. But what's the milestone? I mean, you can't keep losing and losing money. At what rate do you say, okay, I had enough? Or with the creditors, what is the milestone? And you got to get everybody on the same page. And that's why I think one of the fundamental challenges, or maybe the prerequisite, the first step we're going to do is you got to have a valuation. What are we all talking about? What's the value that's available to the creditors? What's the value for the shareholders? What's the value going forward? Now, when you do at least when we do a business valuation for a bankrupt company, more often than not, it's also going to ask, what's the liquidation value? If it hits the fan, if we don't achieve this chapter, what is it for the creditors? Are we better off just saying, we're going to sell the assets, sell the rights, sell everything? We can get more money doing that. And you got to take a look at that. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the orderly versus the unorderly or the fire drill sales.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you bring up the management at the decision point. When do they throw in the towel? And again, I want to bring it back to the solvency analysis, your balance sheet, your cash flow, and the capital adequacy test. Usually we perform these as part of the bankruptcy proceedings. Don't you think, though, that if the business management or the business owners were proactive in their thinking and more aware of these true states of the business, they would want to have a professional come in and execute that solvency analysis, but this time not in the context of putting the company to rest, as it were, but more in the context of disclosing the reality to the owners and the management, and making that an important component of their decision making. Do you see that being done often?
I do that, Jan, but I'm afraid that in more cases than not, at the early stage, the entrepreneurs, especially for mid-sized companies, the big company may be a little different, but even including them, entrepreneurs are extremely looking at the world through a rosy lens. They have a bad month, they brush it off. I'll catch up during the quarter end. They have a bad quarter, it's okay. I'll catch up at year end. Year end, they have a crappy year. It's okay. I got another new year coming. They have a hard time realizing when it's over. And that's one of the advantage of having an independent accreditor player come in there and say, here's some of your challenges. Even some people even call us in before they go to bankruptcy. Okay, what's the value? Because once I have the value of my entity and identifying the risk, which business valuation will do, I can determine whether or not even going into bankruptcy is a viable option. Or if I go into bankruptcy, what's the cost? Because it's, number one, expensive, and number two, difficult to get out because of all the factors associated with the human capital, the vendors, the customers. Don't assume that everybody's going to be around later, because it's different. As I said before, it's like shooting off the red flag and asking for SOS. So you got to contemplate all that. And it's best to have a plan in place before you do that. I have a sign over my desk and it says, failure to plan is a plan for failure. And these companies, you just have to do it. Just plan for, everyone plans for success. Everyone plans for succession, but you got to plan for when things aren't going well as well, probably, if not more.
Yeah. Well, what's the other way of saying that? Those who fail to plan don't plan to fail.
Yeah.
But the expression that I have heard at times, I'm not married to this job. I think the reason why, as you said, these business owners, the management team has looks at the state of the true affairs through the pink glasses, as it were, or rose-colored glasses, as it were, is because they are married to the job. Very often, those entrepreneurs have built up their business from the ground up. So it's very difficult for them to walk away, and it's very difficult for them possibly even to realize that they're living in a state of denial insofar as the true state of the business is concerned.
Yeah. No, it's a definite case, especially if they're forced into a bankruptcy situation. But and the other challenge that we have with bankruptcies, more than significantly different than other business valuations, is we got a whole host of audiences that are very diverse. Let's take you do a bankruptcy business valuation for ABC Manufacturing Company, and they're going into bankruptcy. Well, you got the debtors and the creditors who are definitely at battle. And then you got the unsecured creditors challenging the secured creditors. And then you got a trustee, you got the judge, and everybody's got their attorneys. So it's so important when you do these valuations for bankruptcies that you over document all your assumptions and your footnotes and go through it, because you have to realize that an army full of professionals will be critiquing the valuation.
Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, when we talk about the army of the professionals that are critiquing the valuation, when we issue our report or an opinion of value in the bankruptcy proceedings, and I want to take it in that direction, we really are under the standards dealing with litigation, right?
Yes.
And when dealing with litigation, the standards, both NACPA and NACWA, which I'm a member of both, and so are you, have specific, very rigorously defined components of report that should be present for a typical valuation, be it a conclusion of value or a calculation of value. However, in the litigation setting, even though we are involved in valuation, those standard mandated sections or components of report are no longer required. So what do you typically would then put in your report, given that an army of adversarial contractors and counsel is going to look at it?
That's a very good point. Yeah, and from years of experience of doing this in bankruptcy, I have to document why I didn't follow all those rules. Even if it wasn't applicable for a company in bankruptcy, you can't assume that everybody reading this is, oh yeah, that's not applicable, using my example before for ABC Manufacturing Company, because they're in bankruptcy. But you got to spell out why. So everything, the critique people can understand it. So it's not only all the voluminous check marks, for example, in IRS ruling 5960 and other places that require all these components of valuation, and evaluation in bankruptcy is different. You got to go through that checklist almost step by step and say not only why you did things, but why you didn't do things.
Right.
And that's what I meant when I said before that you've got to over document and include all the footnotes of why you did things and why you didn't do things.
Right. Right.
I think
So perhaps,
go ahead.
when we speak next time in the not so distant future, we could go through a bankruptcy relevant report and go through some of the sections to really denote how those sections vary and to which extent, and versus a typical conclusion or calculation of value report.
Oh, yeah, and I think that'd be an excellent idea. We could do reports and show it to our audience side by side. This would be a normal situation when, and we can assume as someone chapter 11, this is what the criteria have to be.
Right.
And this is what differs from a normal, so that the professional audience, the judges, the trustee, and all the attorneys can understand it.
Right. Because often when I deal with clients who require valuation, broadly speaking, the response is, well, I know I need it. What am I going to get for it? Right. And then you get to the point of, well, this is what it costs and this is what you're getting. I'm sure that bankruptcy is very similar, and people know that, listen, we're going through bankruptcy, but the question is, well, what am I getting for my pain? Like, what am I getting as an output of the professional's work and for all the time that was built? And I think that could very well be a topic of our next discussion.
Yes, I think that would be a very interesting and timely topic. And I look forward to our next conversation and podcast. As always, Jan, it's a pleasure, and have a great day. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Michael. We'll speak soon.